My name is Alcantar, and I was 28 years old when I finally took my boyfriend at his word and walked out of the life I'd been shrinking inside. He told me I'll talk to whoever I want, post whatever I want, and stay out as late as I want. If you have a problem, leave. He didn't even look at me when he said it. He was standing at the bathroom mirror adjusting his hair, checking his jawline under the light, moving with that practiced confidence he only used before nights he never invited me into. So I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I understood something in that moment I'd been refusing to understand for 2 years. I grabbed my bag and walked out while he was still messing with the collar of his shirt, still deciding which watch looked more expensive. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and he didn't hear it. He was too busy perfecting the version of himself he showed everyone else. He came dragging in at sunrise 6 hours later, shoes dangling from his hand, hair flattened, shirt wrinkled, expecting to find me on the couch, waiting like I always did. Like I had done dozens of times before, sitting there in the dark, pretending I wasn't worried, pretending I wasn't slowly breaking from being treated like background noise in my own home. Instead, he found an empty closet, bare hangers swinging slightly from where I'd yanked my clothes off them, the bathroom shelf cleared of my toiletries, my laptop gone from the desk, my shoes missing from the rack by the door, and on his pillow, centered perfectly on the white pillowcase, a note written on the back of an old receipt. You said I could leave, so I did. The call started 3 minutes later, then the texts, then the voicemails. A flood of panic I watched from Jake's couch with a beer in my hand and something that felt almost like peace settling into my chest. 2 weeks before that night, he had already been slipping away in ways that were small enough to excuse if you wanted to. We were sitting at dinner, one of those rare evenings where he was actually home and not rushing out the door, when his phone buzzed on the table between us. He picked it up mid-sentence, smiled at the screen in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months, and started typing. His thumbs moved fast, confident, absorbed. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, suddenly invisible. I asked who it was. He looked up and the smile disappeared instantly, replaced by irritation. Does it matter, he said. You don't own my phone. He said it like I'd accused him of something, like asking a simple question was an attack on his freedom. I didn't push it. I never did. That was the problem. I had spent 2 years not pushing anything, not asking questions that might start fights, not setting boundaries that might make him uncomfortable. I told myself I was being mature, understanding, patient. What I was actually doing was teaching him that my silence was permission. 8 months earlier, we had moved in together. My apartment, my name on the lease, my furniture, my dishes, my routines. Somehow, in less than a year, it had become his space. His friends crashed on the couch without asking, leaving bottles on my coffee table and crumbs on my counters. His late nights turned into an expectation I was supposed to accommodate. My concerns became inconveniences he dismissed without thinking. It was like he'd stopped hearing me altogether. He worked sales, irregular hours, big personality, always chasing the next thing. I worked in IT. Steady schedule, predictable income, the kind of life that quietly holds everything together. Our worlds stopped overlapping. We lived under the same roof, but existed in parallel lanes that only crossed when it benefited him. If he needed a ride, if he needed help with a bill, if he wanted company while he waited to leave again. 3 months before I walked out, he posted a photo on Instagram. Him and a woman I didn't recognize, sitting close in a dim bar I'd never been to. Her hand was resting on his arm, like it belonged there. The caption said, "Sometimes you just need good company." Heart emoji, cheers emoji, no mention of me. No hint that he had a girlfriend waiting at home. I asked him about it the next morning, showed him the photo on my phone. He laughed, rolled his eyes, told me to stop being insecure. It's just social media, he said. Not a good look for you. He made me feel small for caring, so I dropped it and added it to the growing pile of things I was apparently supposed to ignore. A month later, he stayed out until 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, a work night. I texted him asking if he was okay, if he needed a ride. He responded at 3:47 a.m. I'm fine. Stop checking up on me. When he finally walked in, hair messy, shirt wrinkled, smelling like someone else's perfume, he looked at me sitting on the couch like I was the problem. What, you're waiting up for me now, he said. That's creepy. I asked where he'd been. He laughed and said adult things you wouldn't understand, like I was a child who needed to be managed. I should have left then. I know that now. But instead I convinced myself I was overreacting again, that if I just gave him more space, trusted him more, stopped asking questions, things would settle. They didn't. They escalated. Nights out became constant. His phone stayed face down, always on silent, always just out of reach. One morning, I woke up early and saw a notification light up the screen. A woman's name. Can't wait to see you tonight. I didn't confront him. I just started paying attention. I noticed how happy he looked in his stories. Bars, clubs, parties, people I'd never met. He looked lighter out there than he ever did at home with me. I checked our joint account. We'd agreed he'd contribute his share each month. In 3 months, he'd barely put anything in. But his spending told a different story. Expensive drinks, ride shares at 2 a.m, payments with captions like best night ever. He was living like he was single and carefree while I covered rent, utilities, groceries, the quiet structure of a life he was slowly abandoning. I didn't say anything. I waited. Something in me was hardening, not into anger, but into clarity. And when he finally told me to leave, standing in front of the mirror like he'd already won, I understood that the ultimatum wasn't about freedom. It was about power. The night he told me to leave wasn't dramatic at first. It was ordinary in the way endings often are, quiet until they're not. It was a Thursday in mid-October. I remember because I was sitting on the couch with my laptop open, trying to focus on a project due Monday, pretending I couldn't hear him, pacing back and forth between the bedroom and the bathroom. He was getting ready to go out again, later than usual, with more intention than he ever put into staying in. He walked past me in a shirt I'd never seen before, crisp and expensive looking, the kind I knew cost more than our weekly groceries because I'd seen the charge on our card. I asked where he was going. Simple question, normal question. He stopped in the middle of the living room and turned slowly, like I'd asked him something offensive. Out, he said. With who? I asked, closing my laptop. Does it matter? He said, crossing his arms. Yeah, I said, it does. That was when his face changed, like something snapped into place for him too. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just delivered it flat, confident, practiced. I'll talk to whoever I want, post whatever I want, and stay out as late as I want. If you have a problem, leave. He turned back to the mirror by the door and picked up his cologne, spraying it twice like the conversation was already over, like he knew I wouldn't call his bluff, like he'd tested me enough times to believe I never would, and in that moment, everything clicked. He wasn't angry, he wasn't defensive, he was certain that I would stay, certain that I would swallow it like I always had. I didn't say anything. I stood up and walked into the bedroom. I pulled my duffel bag down from the top shelf of the closet and started packing with a calm I didn't recognize. Clothes first. Enough for a week. Toiletries from the bathroom. My laptop charger from the desk. The watch my grandfather gave me. The photo of my parents from the nightstand. The things that mattered. The things that were mine before him and would still be mine after. He stayed in the bathroom the whole time, adjusting his hair, checking his reflection, texting someone I didn't ask about anymore. He didn't hear the zipper on my bag, didn't notice the closet emptying out behind him. I took one last look around the apartment, my lease, my furniture, the life I had invited him into, and slowly lost control of. Then I grabbed my keys and walked out. I drove across town to Jake's place. He lived above a Thai restaurant in a cramped studio that smelled like basil and garlic, no matter how many candles he burned. I knocked on his door just before 10. He took one look at my bag and my face and didn't ask questions. He handed me a beer, pointed at the couch, and said, "Stay as long as you need." I lay there that night staring at the ceiling, listening to traffic and waiting for my phone to explode. It didn't at first, not until he came home and realized I was gone. At 6:13 a.m., the first call came in. His name lit up my screen. I let it ring, then another, then a text. "Where are you? This isn't funny. Your stuff is gone. Did you seriously leave? Call me back. We need to talk. You can't just leave like this." I didn't respond. I watched the messages stack up, the tone shifting from confusion to anger to panic, as he realized I'd actually done it. By 7, he'd called more than 10 times, sent dozens of texts. At 7:34, he sent a photo. The note I'd left on his pillow, photographed with a shaky hand. "You said I could leave, so I did." His reply came back in all caps. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." I turned my phone off, set it face down on the coffee table, and drank my beer. For the first time in 2 years, my chest felt light. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the waiting was over. The next 3 days followed a pattern I'd lived inside for years, just louder now that I wasn't cushioning it. Day 1 was anger. He texted that I was being childish, that I was running away from a simple conversation, that grown adults didn't just disappear. He told me to come home so we could talk like adults, as if telling me to leave had been an invitation for negotiation. Day 2 was denial. He said I was overreacting, that I always took things the wrong way, that I was twisting his words. He said I knew he didn't mean it like that. Day 3 was apology. I'm sorry. I love you. Please come back. We can fix this. The cycle was so familiar it almost felt comforting, and that scared me more than anything. On Monday morning, while he was still texting, I called my landlord. I explained calmly that my boyfriend and I had broken up, that he'd been living with me, but his name wasn't on the lease. There was a pause on the line, and then the landlord said something that settled everything. Your lease, your rules. He has no legal right to be there. You can change the locks whenever you want. I scheduled a locksmith for Saturday afternoon. I gave myself the week, not to give him time, but to make sure I wasn't lying to myself about what I was doing. He must have felt the shift because Friday night he found me anyway. I still don't know how. Someone must have told him where I was staying, thinking they were helping. Jake opened the door, and before he could say anything, my boyfriend pushed past him into the apartment like he still had the right. He stopped short when he saw me on the couch, calm, beer in hand. We need to talk, he said, not asking. No, I said, we don't. His voice rose, that edge of hysteria creeping in. We've been together for 2 years. That has to mean something. It did, I said. And you spent the last 6 months showing me exactly what it meant to you. Nothing. He said I was throwing everything away over one comment. I told him it wasn't one comment. It was 2 years of comments, 2 years of disrespect, 2 years of me shrinking so he could feel untouchable. He cried then, not the kind of crying that comes from regret, but the kind that comes when control slips. He begged me to come home, promised things would change, promised he'd do better. I told him I was changing the locks the next day, and he had until noon to get his things. The tears vanished. His face went cold. You can't do that, he said. That's my home too. Your name isn't on the lease, I said. You were a guest. You're not anymore. The next morning, I went back to the apartment with Jake. He was already there with 2 friends I didn't know, stuffing garbage bags with clothes and shoes, loading them into a beat-up car parked illegally out front. He saw me and walked over, arms crossed, like he was trying to salvage pride. You're really doing this. Yeah, I said. He threatened I'd regret it, told me I'd come crawling back like I always did. Not this time, I said. An hour later, the locksmith changed the deadbolt. New keys, new lock. By 2 in the afternoon, it was done. I went to the cell store and changed my number that same day, paid the fee, walked out lighter than I'd felt in years. For the first time since we met, there was no direct line between his moods and my nervous system. He didn't take the breakup quietly. I found that out through other people before I ever heard it directly. Mutual friends started acting strange, conversations going stiff, invitations suddenly not coming. It didn't take long to realize he was telling his version of the story, the polished one where he was blindsided and I was controlling, insecure, unable to handle a confident man with a social life. In his version, I'd overreacted, kicked him out over nothing, punished him for being independent. It was effective at first. A few people believed him. A few people always will. I didn't correct it. I didn't post anything. I didn't defend myself online or privately. I knew the truth had a way of surfacing on its own, especially when someone couldn't stop talking. And sure enough, the cracks came fast. The first came from Leah, one of his friends I'd only met a handful of times at group dinners. She messaged me late one night, said she felt weird reaching out, but needed to tell me something. We met for coffee the next afternoon near my office. She didn't ease into it. She told me he'd been cheating on me for months. Not once. Not a mistake. An entire parallel relationship with a woman named Erica he'd met through work. Late nights, sleepovers, trips I'd been told were work events. She showed me screenshots, group chats where he joked about juggling both of us, messages where he bragged that I paid the rent, covered groceries, handled everything so he could do whatever he wanted. One message made my stomach drop even though I wasn't surprised anymore. She's solid. She won't leave. Worst case, I apologize and she caves. I thanked Leah, paid for her coffee, and walked out feeling strangely calm. The hurt was there, but underneath it was something cleaner. Confirmation. I hadn't imagined any of it. I hadn't been dramatic. I'd been accurate. That night, his mother called me. No hello, no concern, just a demand. You need to take him back. He made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. I told her he didn't make a mistake. He made choices, repeatedly, and I was making one too. She told me I was throwing away a good man. I told her I was returning him to the consequences of his own behavior. Then I blocked the number. 2 days later, he tried to reclaim the narrative publicly. A long post about heartbreak and growth, about being abandoned by someone who couldn't handle his independence. Comments flooded in with sympathy and praise. I still said nothing. But Leah did. She commented once, publicly, asking if the woman named Erica knew the full timeline. The post disappeared within minutes. Screenshots, of course, didn't. After that, things unraveled quickly. Erica found out about me. He'd told her we'd broken up months earlier. She posted her own comment on one of his photos, calling out the overlap, the lies, the manipulation. He deleted his account by morning. Word traveled fast. Friends stopped answering his calls. Invitations dried up. The confidence he'd worn like armor cracked when no one was clapping anymore. He tried to reach me once more from a new number at 2 a.m. I'm sorry, I messed up, I miss you. I blocked it without responding and went back to sleep. The next day, I felt nothing about it. No urge to explain. No need for closure from him. I already had it. What surprised me most was how little effort it took to keep moving once I stopped turning back. The drama burned itself out without my participation. His story couldn't survive without an audience willing to believe it, and mine didn't need one at all. I didn't orchestrate what happened next. I didn't plan it, didn't push any buttons, didn't whisper to the right people. I just stepped back and watched as the weight of his own choices finally caught up to him. When you stop shielding someone from consequences, they tend to arrive all at once. The woman he'd been seeing, Erica, found out the truth in pieces. First, the timeline didn't add up. Then a mutual friend filled in the gaps. Then the screenshots started circulating. He tried to explain it away, tried to say it was complicated, tried to paint himself as confused and misunderstood. It didn't work. Erica posted one comment under a photo he'd shared about new beginnings, calling out the overlap, the lies, the fact that he'd been living with me while promising her a future. The comment stayed up long enough for screenshots to spread. By the time he deleted the post, it was everywhere. His social circle thinned fast. People who had laughed along with him stopped returning calls. Invitations dried up. The confidence he'd worn so easily looked different without an audience. I heard through Jake that he'd tried crashing on couches, then moving back in with a friend who lasted less than 2 weeks before asking him to leave. Something about late nights, entitlement, never contributing. Funny how patterns repeat when you stop covering for them. He lost his job not long after. Officially, it was attendance issues. Unofficially, it was showing up late, hungover, and careless one too many times. The same freedom he'd defended so loudly started costing him things he assumed were permanent. He tried reaching out again in mid-November from yet another number, a long message about reflection and growth, about realizing what he'd lost. I read it once, felt nothing, and blocked it. A few weeks later, I ran into Leah again by chance. She asked how I was doing. I said good and meant it. She told me he was struggling, that he still talked about me like I was the one who got away. I told her gently that he didn't miss me. He missed the version of me that paid the bills and asked no questions. She nodded like she'd already known that. I never saw him again after that. I heard he moved cities, chasing a fresh start somewhere no one knew his story. Maybe he learned something. Maybe he didn't. It stopped being my concern. What did change was my life. 6 months after I left, I moved into a new place downtown. 1 bedroom, big windows, quiet nights. No eggshells, no waiting up. No checking my phone for explanations that never came. I started dating again in the spring. Met a man through a mutual friend, someone steady and communicative, someone who answered questions without turning them into accusations. On our 3rd date, he asked about my last relationship. I told him the short version. He smiled and said, "Good for you for leaving. Some people never do." Looking back now, almost a year later, the only regret I have is that I didn't leave sooner. I spent 2 years trying to be enough for someone who saw me as convenient, not valuable. I confused patience with love and silence with maturity. I won't do that again. When someone tells you to leave, believe them. Don't wait for clarification. Don't hope they didn't mean it. Ultimatums aren't misunderstandings. They're confessions. He told me exactly who he was and how little space I occupied in his priorities. I listened. That note I left on his pillow wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was honesty. The simplest truth I could give him. He wanted freedom, and I gave him all of it. The freedom to talk to whoever he wanted, stay out as late as he wanted, live however he wanted, and the freedom to come home to an empty apartment and realize that freedom without respect is just loneliness dressed up as confidence. My life is quieter now, simpler, mine, and that's something I won't ever trade away again.